Welcome to Leading Beyond Limits, the podcast where we explore the extraordinary journeys and insights of remarkable leaders who have pushed the boundaries of what's possible. Your host, Angel Radcliffe, who is a digital transformation leader, author, speaker, and financial educator, will lead each episode and dive deep into the stories, strategies, and philosophies that have empowered these exceptional individuals to lead, inspire, and achieve beyond the ordinary. We're about to embark on a journey of discovery and inspiration, and together, we'll learn what it takes to lead beyond limits. So grab your cape, or at least your favorite coffee mug, because we're about to unravel the extraordinary tales of trailblazers who've turned impossible into I'm possible. Let's get started.
Well, hey there. It is so genuinely great to be back in the studio with you today.
Oh, absolutely.
We always look forward to these sessions. And today we are just jumping right in.
Right in.
So I want you to imagine you're driving down the highway at, say, 80 miles an hour in this beautifully engineered high-end car.
Okay.
You look down at the dashboard and everything appears, well, completely flawless. The temperature gauge is right in the middle. There are no check engine lights. The fuel efficiency looks spectacular.
So a smooth ride.
Exactly, a smooth ride. You feel completely in control. You feel like a fantastic driver. But what you don't know is that under the hood, the engine is literally melting down.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, like the oil has completely leaked out, the belts are fraying, and catastrophic failure is just about a mile away.
That is terrifying.
Right, but you just don't know it because somewhere along the line, the sensors that were supposed to send that bad news to your dashboard were disconnected.
That is a deeply unsettling image.
Yeah.
And, I mean, it real strikes at the heart of what we are analyzing today. Your entire sense of security in that driver's seat is, well, it's a complete illusion.
100%.
You are operating on a false premise. You're making decisions based on data that has been artificially sanitized.
Which really brings us to the mission of today's deep dive. We've taken a massive stack of sources, cognitive behavioral research, organizational psychology articles, our own extensive notes, and we distilled them all down into one brief but incredibly potent leadership scenario.
Right.
And the core premise we are exploring today centers around a phrase you hear thrown around corporate hallways all the time, which is psychological safety drives innovation.
Yeah, that phrase. It's a phrase that has almost become a corporate cliche at this point.
Oh, definitely.
It gets printed on those motivational posters and dropped into quarterly all-hands meetings.
Yeah.
But, when you strip away the buzzwords, the reality of what psychological safety actually demands from a leader is profound. It's deeply nuanced, and frankly, it is highly uncomfortable.
Highly uncomfortable. And that is exactly the tone we want to set for this deep dive with you today. We are stepping completely away from typical corporate checklists.
Thank goodness.
Right. There are no 5 easy steps to a happier team to be found here. We are avoiding the tactical, quick-fix advice entirely.
We really need to.
Instead, our goal is to just kind of sit with the inherent tensions of leadership that this scenario exposes. We're going to look at the heavy psychological reality of what happens when the sensors to your dashboard are disconnected by fear.
Because that tension, that is where actual leadership happens. I mean, it happens in the gray areas.
Yeah.
As a baseline for our discussion, it's really crucial to recognize that leadership decisions are almost universally made with partial clarity. You rarely have all the facts. Right, and you certainly never have total certainty. The ideas in this scenario, they challenge leaders at a biological and a psychological level. It forces the leader to confront their own relationship with risk, with visibility, and, well, with the raw truth.
Okay, so let's unpack this, because the scenario starts by just brutally dismantling the most common, most comfortable misinterpretation of psychological safety.
Mm-hmm.
It states, point blank, psychological safety isn't about being nice. It's about creating an environment where the truth can be told without penalty.
That's a huge distinction.
Huge. And when I read that in our scenario, I immediately thought of the difference between like a comfortable dinner party and a high-stakes surgical theater.
Oh, I like that. Let's explore that distinction because it perfectly captures the structural difference in those two environments.
Well, think about it. At a polite dinner party, the ultimate goal of the gathering is cohesion, right?
Sure.
The goal is niceness.
Yeah.
If someone is telling a lively story and they get a historical fact slightly wrong, You don't slam your hand on the table, stop the conversation, and correct them.
No, you'd never be invited back.
Exactly. You just let it slide to keep the peace. You prioritize the social comfort of the group over the absolute truth. But in a surgical theater, the dynamics completely invert.
They have to.
Right. If the attending surgeon is about to make an incision in the wrong place, or, say, administer the wrong dosage, it is the professional duty of every single person in that room, down to the newest, most junior scrub nurse, to shout, "Stop!"
Yeah.
Calling out the error isn't a personal attack on the surgeon. It's the fundamental purpose of the team. In that room, niceness would literally be fatal.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, you've just highlighted the exact tension that paralyzes so many organizations. Leaders naturally default to the dinner party rules.
We all want to be nice.
We do. They default to nice. And we have to ask why that happens. Well, it happens because demanding truth without penalty requires a leader to sacrifice their own immediate psychological comfort.
Oh, that makes sense.
Right. When a team member looks at a leader and says, "Your timeline is impossible," or "This strategy is failing," the human brain does not simply process that as a data point.
It processes it as a threat.
Precisely. The amygdala, the part of the brain responsible for our fight or flight response, it interprets a challenge to our authority or our ideas as a physical threat to our survival.
Wait, a literal physical threat?
A literal physical threat. Biology doesn't distinguish between a lion in the bush and the subordinate questioning your quarterly projections.
Oh, wow.
So when a leader creates a culture of nice, they're unconsciously building a buffer to protect themselves from that biological stress response. They're avoiding the emotional pressure of having their immediate reality or their assumptions challenged.
So it's essentially an avoidance tactic, but it's disguised as this, positive corporate culture.
Exactly.
It is just so much easier to mistake a polite team for an aligned team. Because when everyone is smiling and nodding, the leader gets to feel competent, respected, and completely in control of the vehicle.
But the scenario warns us that this niceness is a lethal trap. Truth without penalty means you, as the leader, have to consciously override your own evolutionary biology.
Which sounds exhausting.
It is. You have to absorb the blow of being told your pet project is a complete disaster, and you have to do it without retaliating, without getting defensive, and, crucially, without silently holding a grudge against the messenger.
I can imagine how exhausting that level of emotional regulation must be to maintain, day after day. Let's be real, if someone tells you your strategy is fundamentally broken, the natural human instinct is to defend the strategy. You want to argue back.
Of course you do.
Oh.
And that is the crux of the tension.
Great.
The leader must possess the self-awareness to feel that defensive instinct rising and choose to suppress it.
Right.
Because if a penalty is applied when the truth is told, and listen, a penalty doesn't have to be a firing.
Oh, it could be subtle.
Very subtle. It can be a sigh, a dismissive wave of the hand, or a sudden icy change in tone. If that happens, the team learns instantly. They learn that the dashboard should only ever show a smooth ride.
And that is the moment they disconnect the sensors.
That's the moment.
Which brings us to a really difficult byproduct of replacing niceness with the unvarnished truth. Because if people are telling the truth and taking risks, mistakes are going to become highly visible. Our scenario really pushes this concept. It says, innovation requires the freedom to fail loudly. If your team is afraid to look stupid, they will never look smart. Now, here's where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
I want to genuinely push back on this concept a little bit on behalf of anyone listening right now who actually manages a team or a department. Because failing loudly seems fundamentally incompatible with corporate survival.
Let's follow that thread. Why does it feel incompatible?
Because we are conditioned from day one to manage optics.
Right.
If a project I'm managing is starting to go off the rails, my immediate instinct is to quietly contain it. I want my team working in the shadows over the weekend if necessary to patch the hole so that by the Monday morning executive meeting, everything looks brilliant and under control.
It's the survival instinct.
Exactly. Why on earth are we asking teams to risk looking stupid in front of the whole company? Doesn't a loud failure just make the manager look incompetent to their own bosses?
It absolutely opens the manager up to criticism, which is exactly why your instinct to hide the failure is so universal. You are hitting on the core vulnerability of leadership.
Okay.
Let's look at the psychological pressures of visibility. When a team fails loudly, the leader feels entirely exposed. The spotlight isn't just pointing at the team's messy error. you know?
Right. It's pointing at the boss.
It's pointing directly at the leader's judgment for authorizing the experiment in the first place.
So why do it? I mean, why not just demand that the team only bring fully baked, guaranteed to succeed ideas to the table?
Because guaranteed success is the enemy of innovation. Leaders often hesitate to allow loud failures. They insist on endless reviews, multiple layers of approvals, constant double checks, not because they lack an intellectual understanding of innovation.
Right. Everyone knows you have to take risks.
Everyone knows it. They institute those bureaucratic layers because of their own profound discomfort with personal accountability and visibility. They just don't want to be left holding the bag if the experiment blows up.
You know, I want to break down what a loud failure actually looks like in practice, because I think there's a difference between being sloppy and being innovative.
Oh, critical difference. A sloppy failure is missing a known deadline because of poor communication. That shouldn't be celebrated.
Right.
But an innovative failure, a loud failure, is, say, launching a beta version of a software product to a small segment of users, watching the interface completely fail to do what you expected, and then openly sharing that data with the rest of the company.
Which is humiliating.
It's embarrassing in the short term.
Yeah.
It feels stupid, as the scenario says. But it saves the company from spending millions developing a product nobody wants.
Okay, I see the distinction. But to allow a team to operate that way, to let them release that clumsy beta and take the heat for it, the leader has to have an almost radical level of self-trust.
Immense self-trust and a deeply grounded, calm presence. The leader must stand firmly in the spotlight, fully visible to the rest of the organization while their team makes messy, public mistakes.
Wow.
They have to possess the internal fortitude to know that this clumsy phase is the absolute only path to looking smart in the long run. In these moments, the leader's primary job is to act as a heat shield.
A heat shield. I love that.
Yeah, they absorb the organizational pressure and the executive scrutiny so the team feels safe enough to keep iterating.
So what does this all mean for the organization if a leader simply cannot provide that heat shield? Like, let's say the leader succumbs to the discomfort. They can't handle the blow to their ego, and they are terrified of the visibility of loud failures. So they subtly insist on those dinner party rules. They demand a polite, guaranteed, quiet environment.
When that happens, the environment closes up completely. Truth is driven underground, and it is replaced by appeasement.
And our scenario has a chilling warning for exactly this situation. It reads, without psychological safety, your strategy is based on what people think you want to hear.
Yeah.
Think about the massive burden of responsibility that places on a leader. If your entire organizational strategy is just a funhouse mirror reflecting your own preferences back at you, you aren't leading. You are navigating completely in the dark.
What's fascinating here is how this dynamic exposes the true nature of responsibility. Responsibility shows up most critically when certainty is incomplete.
Right.
When you don't know what the market will do next or how a competitor will react, that is when genuine leadership is required. But human beings, particularly leaders who feel the intense weight of their organization's survival, we crave certainty. We are desperate for the comfort of knowing we are right.
And an echo chamber provides a phenomenal illusion of certainty.
It really does.
Let's picture a leader sitting at the head of a boardroom table. They pitch a brand new strategic initiative. They look around the room, and every single director nods in agreement. Brilliant idea, flawless execution plan, we are completely on board. The leader gets a massive dopamine hit.
A huge dopamine hit.
They feel like they've solved the puzzle.
They get the dopamine hit, but they have just built an incredibly fragile strategy.
Right.
A strategy built on appeasement shatters the very moment it makes contact with reality.
Right.
The actual market, the actual supply chain, the actual customer. The tragedy is that the team sitting around that boardroom table, they likely knew the flaws in the strategy the whole time. They saw the icebergs.
But they also knew that pointing out the icebergs would trigger the leader's defensive mechanisms. They knew a penalty would be applied.
Exactly.
So they stayed quiet and let the ship sail straight toward the ice.
Which is why it takes profound, mature judgment for a leader to pause in the middle of a meeting where everyone is agreeing with them too quickly. They have to recognize the artificiality of that harmony.
Yeah.
They must actively dismantle that false sense of security and demand that their team poke holes in their logic.
It's like driving that car, realizing the dashboard is suspiciously perfect, and actively deciding to pull over, open the hood, and look at the smoking engine yourself.
Yes.
You have to actively invite the mess into your life. You have to cultivate a healthy suspicion of harmony.
That is a brilliant way to frame it. a healthy suspicion of harmony. If your team never disagrees with you, it is not a testament to your infallible genius. It is a symptom of a dangerously quiet environment.
Which sets up the final and perhaps most difficult provocation of the scenario we're exploring today. If a leader is terrified of living in an echo chamber, how do they actually test their environment?
Right.
How do they measure if their dashboard sensors are actually working?
Sure.
The scenario provides a diagnostic tool. It says, what was the last bad news that reached your desk? Did it come early enough to fix, or was it hidden until it was a crisis?
I would argue that is the most penetrating, revealing question a leader can ask themselves. The velocity and timing of bad news dictate the survival of an organization.
But let's put ourselves in the shoes of the listener for a moment, the person actually running the day-to-day operations. Receiving bad news, early hearing about every little glitch, every interpersonal conflict, every slight deviation from the timeline, it feels like constant, unending friction.
Oh, it's exhausting.
It is physically and mentally exhausting to be the person who's always receiving problems.
Yeah.
There's an overwhelming temptation to look at your team and say, don't bring me problems, bring me solutions.
Don't bring me problems, bring me solutions. It sounds incredibly empowering, doesn't it?
It does.
It sounds like you are fostering independence. But this raises an important question about the difference between managing early friction and surviving a full-blown crisis.
Yeah.
You are absolutely correct that managing early bad news is exhausting. It requires the leader to constantly engage, to constantly pivot, and to expend daily energy.
So why do we delay it? If we know early news is better, why do leaders subconsciously discourage it?
Well, we delay it because acknowledging early bad news forces immediate accountability upon the leader. The biological instinct is to delay pain.
Right.
If a team member comes to you on a Tuesday and says, the major client is slightly unhappy with our initial draft, acknowledging that means you have to intervene on Tuesday, it ruins your perfectly planned week.
Totally ruins it.
If you pretend you didn't hear it, or if you've created a culture where the team is too afraid to bring you that draft on Tuesday, you get to buy yourself a few more days of peace.
You get to enjoy the illusion of the smooth car ride just a little bit longer.
Exactly. But bad news does not age well. It ferments.
Whoa, that's a great word. It ferments.
It does. That small miscommunication on Tuesday, hidden because the team is afraid of the leader's reaction, well, it metastasizes into an irreversible multi-million-dollar client disaster by Friday. True leadership presence is demonstrated by the capacity to calmly receive bad news when there is still time to maneuver. It's about looking at the person who brings you the terrible, messy reality of a failing project, suppressing your own frustration and saying, thank you for bringing this to me early.
Because the alternative is shooting the messenger. And if you shoot the messenger on Tuesday, the next piece of bad news won't come to your desk until the building is literally on fire.
That's right.
You will sit there and act surprised, wondering how things got so bad, completely blind to the fact that the crisis was manufactured by your own intolerance for early friction.
A sudden crisis is very rarely a sudden event. A crisis is almost always just early bad news that was forced into hiding by a lack of psychological safety.
So what does this all mean for us as we wrap up? We've covered a tremendous amount of heavy psychological ground today.
We really have.
We started by moving past the superficial trap of niceness and understanding the biological effort required to allow truth without penalty. We explored the immense self-trust and heat shielding required to endure the discomfort of letting your team fail loudly and visibly. We broke down the immense danger of navigating in the dark by relying on an echo chamber built on appeasement. And finally, we looked at the necessity of welcoming the exhausting friction of early bad news simply because it is the only way to prevent a catastrophic crisis.
Right.
It all comes back to that highway analogy. You have to ensure the sensors are connected to the dashboard, even if you really, really don't want to see the warning lights flashing.
Keeping those sensors connected is the heaviest burden, but also the truest value of leadership. And, as we draw this deep dive to a close, we explicitly do not want to leave you with a prescriptive to-do list.
No checklists today.
No checklists. The scenario we explore today does not offer easy answers,
All right.
and neither should we. Instead, we want to invite you into a space of quiet reflection regarding your own leadership environment. Consider the current quietness of your own team. Is the absence of bad news on your desk a sign of perfect, flawless execution? Or is it a symptom of fear? Where might you be mistaking a silent team for a safe team?
Such a powerful thought. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the scenario. We hope you take some time to sit with these questions in your own leadership practice today. Remember, the most dangerous warning light on the dashboard is the one that never turns on. Take care, and we will see you next time.
Thank you for tuning into another inspiring episode of Leading Beyond Limits. If you enjoyed today's conversation and want to hear more from our incredible guests, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review us on your favorite podcast platform. Your feedback means the world to us. And if you have a remarkable leader in mind who you'd like to hear on our show or any questions and comments, feel free to reach out to us. You can find our contact information in the show notes. Remember, leadership knows no bounds, and with the right insights and determination, you too can lead beyond limits. Until next time, keep reaching for the stars and leading with purpose.